spinning back to the open side. Bete, lovely ball here for Samu, who's quick. Pete Samu looking for Bete, back to Samu. Oh, that is wonderful. That is wild. That is amazing from the Wallabies.
Welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby, where the People's Podcast providing a platform for rugby lovers to come together and support the game that's played in heaven. Match reviews, player interviews, quality rugby chat that is consistent and positive. We do it all for you. I'm your host, Ando, and I'm proud to say that I have the head coach of the Fijian Drua with me, Mick Byrne. Mick, how are you?
Ando, very good, thank you. And you?
Mate, I am loving life. I'm currently on school holidays as a teacher. Just came back from Taronga Zoo to do an interview with you, so it's a good day.
Oh, good. Okay, from one zoo to another, eh?
Oh, something like that. Being a Thursday, what does a Thursday look like for you within preseason for the Drua?
Sorry, mate, I missed that.
Being a Thursday, what does preseason look like for you?
Oh, yeah, we've just finished a pretty big day today. We've got a final training session tomorrow. It's, we're back in. This has been our first full week back in training after Christmas. So right now over here in Nandi, we're in the middle of some pretty heavy rain, and we've been fortunate enough to find our way onto a couple of fields over the last couple of days. But coming back from Christmas, it's been pretty wet. So wet and steamy, hot and steamy, just the way we like it, and get ourselves ready for our home games this year, where it's we're expecting it to be hot and steamy.
That's exciting. And I mean, we'll touch on that fact that you guys are going to be playing all your games except for the Super Round at home, home games at home. But I mean, the weather must throw in a pretty interesting variable within a lot of the planning that you're doing as a coaching staff about what your preseason will look like. How do you adjust when the forecast is saying week of tropical rain?
Yeah, well, we've been really lucky that we're able to build a pretty good facility here when we got home. We found a good size warehouse. We've got a really world-class gym. We've also got about 13 square metres of jiu-jitsu mats on the floor. So we've been able to do a fair bit of work where we get stuck indoors. Obviously, we're missing a little bit of running, but we had a really good pre-season before Christmas. We got some really good running and fitness into us. And we've got out this week, but we had a couple of days where we weren't able to get outside, but we're able to do all our unit work inside on the gym, all our contact work on the gym, on the jiu-jitsu mats. We're able to really get some really good work done. So at this stage, we haven't missed out on anything, but we're very fortunate in the facilities we currently have that we're able to function indoors if we need to. And we've got a little sort of 50 by 50 ground like we've carved out right next to the gym, so we can go out there. We've been out there and done some work on that. So, all in all, we haven't really missed out on anything. But coming forward, we can't have too many days where we can't get on a full size field and train.
And that's one of the things that I'd love to hear from you is as a head coach, how do you go about planning the preseason to make sure that your players are peaking really, really well for the start of the season, considering they have that Christmas break in the middle of it?
Yeah, it does come around pretty quick, our first game. So, you don't have a lot of time after Christmas to build much, fitness. And so you need to do a good lot of work done for us in October, November, December. We make sure we get our good foundations in. We've got our players building up towards game speeds, training towards Christmas. We come back in the new year. We came back on the 4th. We got some good work in the first couple of days to just see where we're at with our testing. And then this week we've been flat out, and we've got ourselves into a pretty good game sense training, like our game speed. Tomorrow's our big game speed day where we get a lot of, I guess what people would call extensive running. So our longer running work. And I think pre-season wise, we just got to make sure that we've got that sort of ability in our running capacity that we can play the game at pace for 80 minutes. And that was something we missed out on last year that we worked on during the season. And this year we've had a pre-season where we've been able to get a fair bit of that work done. So, and all in all, we're pretty happy with where we're at around our fitness. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know that when you guys were playing the Waratahs, because sorry, I'm a Waratahs fan, it was very much kind of in the final 10 to 15 minutes of the game that we were able to come back into it last season when obviously that match fitness wasn't as much of a feature of where the team were. But looking back on the start of 2021 or the preseason for 2022, are you much more confident with where the team are now compared to where you were at this point last season?
Oh, well, yeah, it's, without being corny, it's a bit of chalk and cheese, really. When we started in the middle of November, we came together and started training. Basically, we didn't have any time together before that. Players and staff were all meeting each other on the first day of training, so we had no pre-time together. Some of our players hadn't played since October 2020. So some of our players hadn't played for 13 months, where a lot of the other Super Rugby teams, their players had played a super season and played either some shoot shield or some NPC or some test matches. Our players hadn't done anything since October 2020. So we were, I think we documented it pre-season last year. We lost 130 kilos as a squad over 3 months.
That's got to be a record. That's got to be a record within the Super Rugby preseason, surely.
I'd say it'd have to be a record. But there was a lot. We had a lot. It wasn't so much the fact that we worked extremely hard. It was just the fact that some of our players, you're asking players that 12 months before had no vision that they were ever going to play Super Rugby. And they were in Fiji and, Skipper Cup got called off because of COVID. And so they're sitting around not doing anything. And suddenly, in August, September, they get asked to come and join a Super Rugby team. And a month later, they're flying out to Australia to start pre-season training, and they hadn't done nothing. They hadn't done anything for 13 months. So we knocked a lot of weight off them, but we spent those first 2 or 3 months just getting to sort of a level that we could actually start training, and then we were playing. So where we are now, we're watching training now is compared to, as coaches, we sit back and think about watching training last year and seeing players walk around the field when they were tired, and now we're running out trainings where and the boys are working really hard, and we're doing extra running top-ups at the end of training. It's a massive contrast to last year.
It's got to be incredibly kind of gratifying for you as a coach. But in preparation for our chat today, I spent a bit of time just kind of reading a few articles about some of your backstory, because I'd always known you as Mick the Kick, the kicking skills coach that had worked with New Zealand and the Wallabies and the like. And one of the things I wanted to ask is, with your background, particularly within AFL, obviously you're Australian-based for large portions of your life. What have you had to adjust to most in terms of living in Fiji, the Fijian culture, and working with a primarily Fijian team?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, I did my time in Australia. I grew up playing rugby league and rugby as a schoolboy, and I switched over to Australian rules at 16 years of age. But I left Australia in 2001, and so I've travelled the world and coached in different countries, and I've coached a lot of Pacific Island players and a lot of Fijian players in the past. So, looking at it from an Australian perspective, I think the 22 years that I've been travelling the world has allowed me to sort of broaden my cultural experiences. Coaching 3 years in Japan in a foreign language, that helps me understand my communication when I'm talking to people that English is a second language. It helps me understand the speed I talk, the language I speak, the words I use. So all those types of things I've had plenty of experience at. The Fijian culture is, I've had a little bit of experience, but nothing prepares you for coming and living in a country and experiencing it that way. I've been out to local villages and had a look at the way of life there and what our players and how our players live. I've taken on a lot of information from our players and from staff that have got a lot of experience, and from leaders, the community leaders, and understanding, the resilience that's built into our players, and how we can maximise that, but also our ability, being resilient, and our ability to accept when things don't go well leads to a situation where everything seems to be, it'll be okay. Well, it'll all be okay. Sometimes you need to create a little bit more urgency than that. And so working with our players and our leaders about how we can create some urgency within our group to add to the strength of being able to deal with adversity and being resilient. Well, sometimes also we need to learn how to be urgent and get things done urgently. So yeah, it's been a good learning curve.
One of my favourite moments of last season was the final match that the Ndrua had against the Chiefs in Lautoka, and it was absolutely amazing just to see the stands absolutely packed, the roar of the crowd as the Drua had their comeback in that kind of latter period of the second half, people hanging off the trees and the like to try and get a view of the game. How important are the Drua for Fiji and Fijian rugby as a whole, as the first, from my understanding, fully professional, provincial team within a top level competition?
I think you can't really put words to how important it is. It's the link between the young players in the village, and I mean, I've got a little local beach down here at Wailoaloa, and you go down there in the afternoon, and there'll be 20 or 30 kids throwing the footy around, playing touch footy, and they're, in the past, if they were looking at being a professional rugby player, it was about leaving home, going overseas, and leaving the village, which some of them have never left their own village, let alone left Nandi to go to Suva. And for them to pursue a professional rugby career, they had to leave the country. And for us to be now in there, and these young kids at Wailoaloa are looking at saying, well, I've now got a professional team here that I can aspire to be part of. And it brings professional rugby onto the island. It's a massive thing for young aspiring rugby players and coaches to see that they no longer have to leave their families behind as such, go overseas and to pursue professional rugby. Yeah, there's only one team, so yeah, the spots are going to be tight, but there is now a pathway for the young players to see that they can aspire into professional rugby. So from that sense, the Ndrua being here is massive. It's a massive part of Fijian rugby culture now.
And I might actually jump forward to a fan question that came in because it kind of deals with this topic. So a friend of the pod called Rev got in touch saying, with Ratave having already left and Humbosi signed to leave for Racing 92, I believe, at the end of the 2023 season, do you have much concern about the Drua being able to continue to be that showcase for Fijian rugby, only to see the best players picked off and taken to higher paying leagues throughout Europe or maybe even Japan? Do you see that as an unfortunate reality of the current landscape, or do you have particular plans in which you're going to be trying to keep some of the rising stars within the Drua at home?
Yeah, look, I think it's a reality. I don't think it's an unfortunate reality. It's just the reality. Karevi left the Reds and the Wallabies. Korobiti left the Rebels. Luatua left the Blues. Piatau left the Blues. There are good players leaving Australia and New Zealand rugby to pursue overseas contracts. One of the things for Fijian rugby growth is that those players are still eligible to play for the Flying Fijians, even though they leave. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the case of New Zealand, those players aren't eligible for the All Blacks. In the case of Australia, there's only a window that they keep talking about what that looks like. But I think it's just a reality of where we are and the sort of money that's around here versus the money that they can get either in Japan or the UK. So for us, we understand that that's a reality, and we're going to lose players. We want to hang on to all those players would be great, but when you look at the money that they're being offered overseas and what they're getting here, that's why, a Luatua or a Piatau or a Karevi or a Korobidi leave Australia and New Zealand. It's just you can't. Yep. Australian Super Rugby teams and New Zealand Super Rugby teams can't compete with that money. So the Fijian Drua team can't compete with that. What we can do is spend our time getting that next batch of players coming through. So when Karevi leaves the Reds, Paisami steps up. When Luatua leaves, Akira Iwani or, Sututu or someone else steps up. So we're in that same boat here where we've got to make sure that when we lose those players, come the reality of 1 or 2, 3 or 4 players a year we lose, because we're actually going to put some very, very good players on the world stage. And, the big money clubs will come and see an Mbossi and they'll go, wow, we want this fella. The Flying Fiji, he won't be lost to the Flying Fijians. He'll be lost to the Drua, but we're going to try and hang on to them as best we can. As I said, even the great Super Rugby team struggled to hold on to their players. The big challenge for us and the reality for us is to find that next group. So with that in mind, we've got 10 young players, academy players that are training with us, 3 days a week. And there's a couple of good young players coming through there that, next year we had 60 players come through the Drua program, not the Drua program, the Drua facilities, the Fiji Rugby program, as their academy players. They came in and used the Fijian Drua facilities. So they've already had a taste of what it looks like to be part of an Drua player. And there were 60 players that came through there in December that we'll keep an eye on over the next 12 months. And I'm sure, being Fiji as it is, I'm sure some of those players are going to be world-class players in the future. So we've just got to make sure we do the right thing there and develop our young players coming through. And once we lose 1 or 2 out of the top, we replace them with another 1 or 2 coming through.
That production line of talent is incredibly exciting, and I'm sure you're working pretty incredibly closely with Simon Raului as well for that pathway program.
Yeah. Yes. No, definitely. And Bill Godolo. There's probably 3 or 4 people at the moment that have had a pretty good role in under-20s coaches, and Simon, etc. There's a good group of people that are working on the next batch. The thing that we add to that group that they've worked really hard over the years is, instead of creating these players and seeing them shipped off to a school in New Zealand or a club in New Zealand or, the French academies, there's last year we had 2 locks playing in the under-20s, 6'9" and 6'8", under-20 locks that are in France, have been signed in France, because there was no professional program for them to sign up to the year before. Now, trying to bring them back from France is a challenge, but we'll continue to talk to them, and when that opportunity comes that they want to come back, I'm definitely we're talking to them. But if we were here before they got pinched to go over to a French academy and we said, we want you to be an Drua player and play Super Rugby, every chance they probably stay. So I'd say in the future, those sort of players will be staying in Fiji.
Well, in spirit of reflection, why don't we just have a quick chat about 2022? So just for the listeners, in 2022, the Drua finished 11th with 2 wins from 14 matches, with the final game being an incredible, one of the best games of the season, with a 35-34 loss to the Chiefs in Lautoka, which was absolutely just a stunning match all round. Mick, how would you rate the season for the Drua out of 10, or an equivalent kind of rating if you were to kind of look back and reflect?
Yeah, look, on reflection, I think we were disappointed that we didn't beat the Western Force. We were up when the final siren went. So we're disappointed with that loss. We're disappointed with the Highlanders loss. I think at one stage we might have got to 14 points up. And I think we put all our points on in the first half. We might have kicked a penalty in the second half. We lost our way and lost our shape in the way we want to play in the Highlanders. We got caught up trying to do things that was a win. So there's 4 wins. The Reds, the Reds got away from us at the end, and we had a chance to win that one at the death with a 5-metre line out, and we bombed that. And then the Chiefs, we nearly got there. So all in all, I was really pleased with where we got to from where we started.
Yep.
When you look back and see where we started in November and that first training run, and you're sort of seeing, players, we do a couple of fitness tests that other teams do, and we were sort of 60% of the score of the other teams. So we were, some players were 50% as fit as their opponents in November. And I think we got to be about 70% as fit as our opponents based on the standards that I know come out of Australian Super Rugby and New Zealand Super Rugby around fitness tests. We got to about 60% of that standard fitness. So we were well underdone around being ready to play Super Rugby. So the fact that we won our 3rd game, we bombed I think it might have been our 4th or 5th game against the Western Force. We bombed that one. We were up when the siren went. We fell over, we fell against the Reds, and then that last one against the Highlanders, and then so all up, we could have had 5 wins under our belt. Not that, I'm not playing the what-if game. I'm just saying that, we were close enough to win 5 games. That would have put us in the finals.
Yep.
And if we do that, I'm sitting here going on that. That's the last thing I expected, to be playing finals in our first year. It certainly was a goal. No question it's a goal. And this year, having done what we've done, we definitely got a goal. We're playing, we need to be playing finals this year to say we've grown from last year.
And I mean, when you take into account the other factors, like the team was based out of Lennox Head for the entire season. You guys got flooded out of Lennox Head with all the floods that were happening around the Northern Rivers region as well.
Yeah, we got evacuated out of there, and we got shifted into hotels. We were living. We had three home bases, living out of 3 different hotels last year, and we played, I think, 14 of our 16 games we played on different grounds. So all in all, but this team has an ability to do that. As I said, the resilience they have, it's a massive strength of ours. There was no whinging or moaning or groaning about it. When we played the Rebels up on the Sunshine Coast, we were due to play that at Suncorp. We got evacuated out of Lennox. The bus that we were going to take was underwater. So when we rang the bus company, we said to the bus company, we're going to leave a day early because we can't trust the river up north. The highway looks like it's going to be closed tomorrow, so we're going to leave today. And so we can't leave with us. Our bus is underwater. So the water had flooded into Ballina. It actually was higher than the bus. So the bus was underwater. At 5:30 in the afternoon, we just decided we'd all get as many cars as we could, and we headed off. We had, Andrew Fraser from Lennox. He just got a car out the front and took off up the highway, and we just followed him up the highway with as many cars as we had loaded up. We stopped at a BP servo on the way up and grabbed some snacks, and then got to the Sunshine Coast about 10 o'clock that night. A day, 2 days before we expected to travel, and came out and won that game. So that's a real strength of ours, is our ability to live in that world, adjust and have some resilience. But I think being at home now, we'll have different set of challenges, but our players will be settled, and it'll be great. The fact that we'll be able to say, well, we've got 3 home games at La Toca and 3 home games in Suva. But it's at home, it's a home base. Whereas we didn't have a home base. We're playing Sydney, we're Melbourne, we're Gold Coast, we're Sunshine Coast, we're Brisbane. All our home games were everywhere.
That's just so incredible to hear that level of improvisation, but then to also just appreciate how well the team performed despite all the challenges and the circumstances that you're putting forward. I mean, you look at somebody like Vinay Hambosi, who he had that story come out that he'd been in hospital with a serious blood infection that could have put his life in danger. And then he comes back, puts a 6-month recovery window down to about 2 months due to kind of the work ethic.
12 months.
Oh, wow, 12 months. And then he becomes basically the player of the season.
That's right. Well, they told him when he was in hospital in Dunedin that he probably may not run or play again for 12 months.
Incredible.
So, for him to come out and do what he does from game one is unbelievable.
Incredible. Well, looking ahead then into 2023, you've already spoken a little bit about the excitement for playing the games out of Suva and Lautoka. I'm assuming that the change of expectations will be the main challenge that the team will have to overcome now that they're playing 6 games at home against such a passionate audience, a passionate home crowd, that there'll be almost a new set of nerves and challenges that are the things that they'll be overcoming.
Yeah, I think last year they had the nerves because they hadn't been at home. So, there was that whole excitement of coming home. Forget about the rugby, just seeing the wife, seeing the kids, seeing mum, seeing dad, seeing brother, seeing sister. Hadn't seen for 9 months. Just the fact that that excitement was massive. And so, and I think that probably didn't cost us, but certainly has an influence on your preparation for a game. That suddenly you're at home and, you haven't been to your village for 9 months and you go out to the village and, it's just seeing family and friends and all that. Having the group here now, there'll be, the expectation will be there, but I think our boys understand that from when they were little kids as well. They understand now that they look back and see those little kids and they want to do them proud. So I don't think the expectation is going to surprise us, and I think we'll be better prepared for it because we won't have that excitement, if you like, of seeing family and friends for the first time in 9 months and then trying to get out and focus back on the rugby after having that excitement.
Did you give the players a couple of days off when you first flew back home so that they could spend that time and catch up with family and friends?
Yeah, we did. We organised 2 or 3 days there. When we first got in, we had to get in and play because we played the weekend before. We had to travel back and had to prepare. So we flew into Nandi and we gave the Nandi boys the opportunity to stay in Nandi that night and catch up with family and make their way over to Suva the next day. And then the following week, we travelled up to Nandi and we prepared in Nandi to go to the Hurricanes. And I think in a roundabout way, it probably affected us, but it was more important from a human element perspective that we did. And I think it affected our build-up for the Hurricanes game that we gave the Suva boys the opportunity to stay in Suva and come up to Nandi a couple of days later. So we missed a couple of days prep leading into the Hurricanes. Then we had to travel to Wellington and have a training session over there. So, but it was more important that we allowed it. We gave our players the opportunity to go and catch up with their families. So, we certainly did that. And then with the Chiefs one, we stayed here after the Chiefs game. So that was good. We didn't have to give them any time off for that week because they were back home and they were staying at home after the Chiefs game.
Yeah, brilliant. So looking ahead then to the 2023 season, you mentioned before the fact that you'd be aiming for top 8 finals within the competition. What else are some of the goals that you're setting for the team in terms of either results or quality and style performance that they're putting out on the field?
Well, I think if you look at some of the stats around the world, some things we did are world class. Attracting defenders to the contest. I think we're number 1 in the world for attracting 2 defenders into a contest. I think we're rated. This is right around the world, including the European teams. I think we're rated 3 in the world for engaging 3 defenders into a tackle contest. So we do some things really, really well. But then there's other things, our turnovers were up there as well, so our turnovers were, were probably, some of the worst in the world. So getting some of the things that we let ourselves down with last year, which was loose carries, it took us probably halfway through the year to understand that as a forward pack, it's okay just to carry and get tackled and present a good, strong ball after making a 1 metre gain. Making a 1 metre gain here in Fiji doesn't seem to be anything. People aren't happy with that. The crowd here expect you to be making line breaks every time you touch the ball. And when you watch our players play, when you watch the young players just out on the beach playing touch footy, it's no touch. It's no touch footy. So you don't get touch with the ball. And we had a little bit of that carry over into our game last year where every time we went towards near contact, we didn't take the tackle. We tried to get a flick and offload off. And while that was a strength of ours in good times, it let us down at other times where it would have been better just to take the hit, get a good hit, get a good carry, get across the gain line, present the ball and go again. And I think we developed that understanding as the year went forward, and already in training, we're presenting ourselves a much better shape there, more consistent understanding around how we carry through the contact area. Those things in reflection for us, they're going to be areas of improvement.
That's incredibly exciting. Harry Dale got in touch and asked, which players should we be keeping an eye on to light up the scene this year? Anybody who name we may not recognise?
You probably recognise them, but last year, as a coach, you don't like putting names to players when that happens because then you're sort of playing favourites or you're putting people out. But I remember last year, Kitty Solar is a very, very good player. I think he's going to be somebody special to keep an eye on as the year unfolds. Everybody's looking for another Hambossi, but Hambossi about. I think he's going to be. Yep. He's put on another 4 kilo of lean muscle mass, if that's even possible, because he's probably our leanest player in the team, and he's just put another 4 kilos on. So, wow. Yeah, he's an exceptional athlete. Look, we're going to unearth another 3 or 4 really good players this year. That as Super Rugby unfolds, they'll come forward. I think once Kitty Solar's out there, I think he's going to be somebody pretty special for us.
What we might do now is let's jump into the fan questions, and we'll just jump through these pretty quickly because you've been more than generous with your time so far after a long day of preseason. So another question. Actually, we're chatting rugby. Who doesn't love chatting rugby at this point?
That's it. It could be worse. I could have a real job.
True. Rev has got in touch in 2022. He kind of thought the team or the approach was about getting minutes into the whole squad with a lot of rotation to bring players up to feeling and understanding of what the requirements of Super Rugby were. How confident are you of knowing your best 23 this year?
Yeah, best 23. Look, I think I've got a pretty good idea of a 15 or 16, But when we get out to that other the backup part of the team, look, we're pretty even there. Again, when we finished the year, we sort of had an idea around where we were around our best 23. We're a lot closer to having that this year. We're a lot closer to understanding players that I wouldn't say money ball players, but players that don't have a big rep that actually work bloody hard for you. And, they don't score well on the stat sheet some weeks, but they do some really good unseen stuff that as a coach you go, right, I'm happy with that. So sometimes you get, players, what about him? He's this, he's that. Why isn't he getting picked? And as a coach, you see other guys that do a lot of the hard work and the grafting work that others can shine. So we're just working our way through those as well. But it's a good question and a good observation that we needed to give everybody last year an opportunity to show us, because this year we're going to start narrowing down our best 23 every week, and some players might spend a bit of time either in or out of the team.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's just one of the really exciting things, that you have that capacity to have such challenge and competition for those spots now.
Yeah, that's right.
One question that Hugh Tyndall came in and asked was, how do you balance the traditional, I mean, I don't know if it gets annoying hearing this, but the Fijian flair that the Fijian players are known for, with what seems to be the structure and the expectations of playing kind of top flight professional rugby within the Super Rugby season. How are you trying to balance that, or make sure that the players are, like you mentioned before, not just going for the offload all the time, but are willing to take the contact and do the effective recycle for a quick play on the next phase?
It's a great question. I think it's probably our biggest challenge last year and again this year. I think personally, rugby gets way too structured. But I think when you come and coach here, we need to have some of that structure in our system. It depends on what you think structure is. For me, structure is where our players are on the field, not what we do.
Okay.
So how we're balancing up, like it depends on your terminology of structure. So my view of structure for our team is, we want you to have a certain position on the field where we expect you to be, but where the ball goes, I don't know. I don't know where the ball's going to go. From a line out, we know we're going to have a couple of strike plays where we go here and we go there, but then after that, we want to go where the defence isn't. So our structure is not going to be, let's play off 9, from the edge, let's play off 9 and then play off 9 from the middle and then use our backs, which is, some teams have a structure where, they might have a structure and then they play, let's play through our pods through the middle, or we just want to make sure that our players get back across the field and then look for where the defence isn't.
Yep.
Now, that way we can continue to play with our Fijian flair, if you like, but we've got a structure around that says we're all in a position, and if the ball goes here, you guys are responsible there. If the ball goes here, you're responsible. If it goes here, you're responsible. But I don't want to get a situation where we say off the edge, we're going to play off 9 and play off 9, or from an edge, play off 10 and then come back down the short side. Because then that's going to rob us of our ability to play the game the way these guys like to play the game. If there's an opportunity to look up, and if some of I want them to play that, I want them to take that opportunity and play that space.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think that what you're talking about there is really, really interesting, because I mean, from my perspective as like a rugby fan, a rugby lover, when we think of structure, we generally think more of the set piece elements of the game, such as the line out, the scrum, the ruck involvements that players that teams have. And I mean, typically the most structured teams will generally be anything that Jake White coaches, the Brumbies and maybe Ireland as the top few. But obviously you've been able to try and adapt through your knowledge and understanding of both the typical structured approach and the nuances of your players. Has that been something that you thought about prior to becoming a head coach, or is it something that you just had to learn after conversations with people who knew Fijian players and Fijian rugby a lot more?
No, I think it's something that I've always had in my mind about the game. Like, I've always felt, and this is something, you mentioned Jake White. I worked with Jake back in 2001 in South Africa, and I remember we sat down one day and he asked me the question. He said, "What do you think the game's going to look like in 10 years' time?" And I said to him, "Well, I think what the game will look like is forwards carrying and playing the ball like backs, and backs carrying and cleaning out like forwards." And if, in 2001, I thought if the forwards could play more rugby, the game would open up. And if the backs could look after the ball and clean out and be more and stronger over the ball, then we'd secure the ball on line breaks and things like that. So I think for me, I've always thought about the game that way. There's 15 players out there, and I've been involved in different teams. I've been around different countries and heard people talk. if you've got a single number on your back, get out of the way, let the double numbers play. All these sorts of talk, that goes around. You just got to upskill every player to play the game. And I was talking to a USA guy last year a couple of years ago about coming over. I was over in the States, and I was talking to a guy over at Austin, and he's perfectly built tight head prop, but he played, and I don't know the position, so I don't know if he was a linebacker, but his job was as on the defensive side, trying to tackle the running back or trying to tackle a running player. And he was at high school. He played 9 years of football and never touched the ball.
Wow.
And I said to him, well, if you became a tight head prop, you could touch the ball 15 times a game. You could get involved. You're involved in the game. If he was built like a tight head prop. I said, you need to consider rugby, because you need to be. And I always think if we've got 15 players, they all need to be touching the ball. We need to use them. And so, becoming a head coach and then becoming a head coach of the Fijian team where all our forwards love carrying the ball. There's back spirit trapped in all our forwards' bodies. So it's just the big part for us is to learn to be a little bit stronger when we carry and be a little bit more forward oriented with our carries and not trying to fling the ball every time we carry.
Here's a follow-up question for you then. Is where do you see the game then being in 10 years? In 2033, what do you think the game of rugby will look like at that time?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. When I looked at the game and where was the growth? The growth was in the existing laws of the game, the way the game was being played. The existing laws of the game meant that if our tight five could become part of the first rucks off counter, become part of counter attack, become part of turnover attack, and have hands on the ball and play in that, the game would open up enormously. There's laws of the games that keep changing, and so you're sort of managing the laws of the game. Where we'll be in 10 years' time, I think we'll perfect our time parts of the game. I think there's still a lot of dead time in the game. I'd like to think that we find a way to get sort of 40 minutes of game time, 50 minutes of game time. Without adding extra time, people turn up. At the moment, the game starts at 7:30. They're still in the stadium at 9:30, and they've watched 30 minutes of footy. I'd like to think that we can find a way that they can turn up, watch the game start at 7:30. They're still in the stadium at 9:30, but they watch 45 or 50 minutes of game. And I think that's our challenge. And how we do that, trying to, work with our skill sets, keep the ball on the field, get fitter. I'd like to think that we can find a way to increase our game ball in play time by about 10 minutes at least.
And that will also change the type of player which is on the rugby field as well. Because, over the last, say, 10 or so years, you've seen a rise of kind of your massive number 13s. So, I don't know, who would be the typical player? Like your Jamie Roberts, your George North, your Manu Tuolangi, all those players. But if the ball is in play for another 10, 15 minutes per game, then you're going to need a far more aerobic player, somebody who can actually stay on the field for a longer period of time, and the capacity or the impact of the bench players will be much more important as well. So I think that would result in some really interesting changes.
Yeah, I think so. But also, having been fortunate enough to be involved at rugby league at, the professional level, coaching AFL at the professional level, I know the capacity of players' fitness levels. And a rugby league players, they mightn't be able to play 80 minutes, but their efforts their repeat efforts are enormous. And so we know that we can get players to repeat those efforts. I still think rugby players can be fitter. And also think, I know I'm a bit different and I'm not an old school traditionalist, but I keep hearing about reducing the bench down so that we can play the game with players that are fatigued. Well, if that's not taking the game backwards, then I don't know what is. One of the number one reasons for people getting injured is fatigue. And if we can't coach our players to be better attackers, that we need to go to a place in the game where we say we're going to reduce the number of players on the bench so that we can actually see if players are under fatigue. That's how the game's going to open up. Well, then I can't accept that. I can't accept that as a coach. I know we can make players more skillful than that. The ability to catch and pass over either foot, we're still not where we could be as a world game in that regard. And so we can still improve the skill sets of our players. That we don't need to take the game backwards and slow the game down, get people out on the field that are unfit just so we can see more tries scored. I think we can take it further. We can add skill to our game. We can get our tight five fitter. We can get our tight five playing better rugby, and that'll open up the game, and that'll give us more tries.
What I think we might do then, because again, I said we were very happy with the time that you'd spent, and now we've gone on for another 15 minutes, just loving chatting about rugby. Four final questions. We might do them as quick fire questions. So Simon Nelson has asked, do you see Ravovo as a 12 or a 13? He had successful outings in both roles last season.
Yeah, I do. He's training at the moment at 12, but he can certainly go to 13. I think we've been working on his skill sets as a 12, so his ability to shift the ball. But he's such a player that, he's such a good player that, either spot. But at the moment, he's starting at 12.
Okay, good to know.
But could go to 13. So it's a good question.
And knowing Simon and knowing Rev as well with some of his questions, we're all fantasy draft rugby players as well. Okay. So we're trying to get insights into some of the truer players for our fantasy rugby teams too.
Okay, I like it.
So knowing that Ravovo will get more touches of the ball at 12 is very important for our picks in a couple of weeks.
Okay. A few more gain line breaks, a few more meters gain.
Exactly, yep. Exactly, yep. Poor props don't get that many points, but those outside backs or centres, ball running centres, they're gold. Thalion has asked, have there been many challenges transitioning from a skills coach to a head coach?
Yeah, look, in 2009, I was appointed forwards coach at Japan national team. I'd been doing work with the forward pack at the All Blacks around the lineouts, and I was in charge of the restart. So I transitioned into different parts of the game as when I was with the All Blacks in that 2-7, 2-8, 2-9, 2-10 window. Moved in as a forwards coach with Japan 2009, 10 and 11. So I was very fortunate in 9, 10 and 11 that I was coaching Japan and the All Blacks. So I was a skills coach at the All Blacks with responsibilities around the restarts and exits. So I had responsibilities for aspects of the game. I was the forwards coach at Japan. Then I became the forwards coach at the Blues. So basically my transition from a skills coach started in 2009 and has progressed through to responsibilities in aspects of the game and moving into a head coaching role. So, it's a good question, but my transition as such has been ongoing since around 2009.
Brilliant. Red Roberts asks, where is Oliveretti? So I might say the name incorrectly. Oliveretti Vaitukani these days.
Yeah. So Freddie needed to have surgery, ACL surgery. He got quite a bad illness, lung infection. So he was unable to travel to Australia. So he still hasn't had that knee repaired. So at this stage, he's still under medical watch. And, it was unfortunate for him that he got quite a bad illness, lung infection. which stopped him travelling to Australia. He was due to go over and have a ACL surgery. So at the moment, his ACL still hasn't been repaired.
Okay, that's unfortunate for him, but good to know that he's still around and hopefully can get back onto the pitch once that's addressed. Balumba has asked as our final question, if you could have one thing for the team, what would it be?
One thing. $10 million to keep players in Fiji. One thing for the team.
I was just saying, could be one thing for the whole team, one thing for you as a head coach that would make your job easier. Whatever it is, your choice. You have a magic wand.
A training field.
Easy.
So it's something we're working towards having. At the moment, we're training off international schools ground. It's been good. We've been at Prince Charles. There's a patch of turf out at Denarau. So at the moment, we're shifting between fields. Fiji Airways, our sponsor, is looking at, which is near our gym, giving us a block of land we can put a field on. So we're just progressing down through there. But to actually, to be able to walk out of our gym and onto a training field would be pretty awesome for us. After, at the moment, we still don't have a training field. Everybody here is working really hard to get that. Fiji Airways, the sponsor. I know, our organisation has worked really hard with them. So you never know, we could have one of those within the next 2 or 3 months. But
hopefully that will come across really soon.
That'd be something that'd be awesome to be able to just walk out and go onto our training field.
How good. Yeah. And what that makes me think is just how special it is to have the Fijian Drua in Super Rugby with all the challenges that they faced in 2022. And despite the huge improvement that you've spoken about so far in preparation for this season, the fact that a Super Rugby team doesn't yet have a training field to be working on consistently just shows the fact that they still have so much more opportunity and room for growth as well as a team and as an organization. So I, for one, I'm incredibly excited to watch their growth this year. And he's hoping that they're able to push their way into the top 8 and give some of the top teams a real run for their money come final season.
Yeah, and I think, Ando, you're spot on, mate. I think we look at it like that as well. Like, there's a great opportunity to grow, not look at what we don't have. I don't think our people look like that. The resilience that's in them is always half full. The glass is always half full. And it's always the opportunity to fill it up. And, we look at the opportunity that presents us. We've got grounds we can train on. How good. We've got a ground we're working on. How great. And, in 3 months' time, we could have that field up and running and, we just get on with it in the short term. So I know the organisation is working extremely hard behind the scenes to get on top of that for us, and they've put a great indoor facility together for us. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast around our gym facility and our training mats in there. The indoor facility we have there is world class. So everybody behind the scenes is working extremely hard to give us every opportunity to present ourselves as a final prospects for 2023.
Well, I'm incredibly excited to be watching, and I really, really thank you for your time in helping to provide a bit more of a picture and understanding of where the Drua are and what we can expect of them for the 2023 season. So thank you so much, Mick. Yeah. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your preseason.
Yeah, thanks, Ando. We're really looking forward to hosting the Rebels here in 3 weeks. So it'll be great to give our local crowd the first taste of 2023 season here in Nandi. So thanks very much for your time and good luck with the rest of your podcast for the year.
Thanks, mate. Appreciate it.